Hello dear students, I'm Nancy Cormuz, Assistant Teacher from Nepali Girls High Secondary School. So we meet once again with the economic activities of man, and as it is we had done on agriculture. So today you must have seen it in my previous videos that we had done the economic activities of man. So today we start with the cultivability of land and different types of farming methods that are practiced in different parts of the world. So as you can see again in the board, I have written that they have been divided accordingly, and that would be the areas of farmland, the objects of agriculture, climatic features and number of cropping seasons. So let's do one at a time. So we start off with the classification of farming according to area, land and population. So here I have written the intensive agriculture. So what is intensive agriculture? It is usually the cultivation of crops on small plot of land for consumption by the farmer and his family. And it is mostly practiced in the developing countries. Rice is a typical crop that is grown by this method. The use of the minimum labor, fertilizer and high-yielding seeds to grow more and more crops are used and to preserve the fertility of the land. This method is carried out in China, Japan, India and other densely populated countries. The yield per hectare is low as modern inputs are not used. Next we go on to the extensive commercial farming. In this type of farming, wheat and corn are raised on huge farms for commercial purposes. So as it is, if they are used for the commercial purposes, modern machineries such as tractors and combine harvesters are used. Fertilizers, high-yielding variety of seeds, pesticides and other modern inputs are also used. Hence, for this, the yield per hectare is highest in extensive commercial farming. It is usually practiced in the developed countries of the world such as USA, Canada, Russia, Australia and so on. Now moving on to the classification of farming according to the objects of agriculture. Here I have written, it is written as a self-sufficient or the subsistence farming, the commercial and the plantation crop farming. So what does self-sufficient farming mean? Self-sufficient farming can, in other words, be written as subsistence farming. It is a type of that farming where the farmer produces crops and rear animals to fulfill his needs only and not for the market. So that is why it has been written as a self-sufficient farming. For this, it is known as a self-sufficient farming or the subsistence farming. And the main characteristic of this is that it happens to have a very small farmland. The production only meets the needs of the farmers and his family. No excess production for the market, and the work in the farmland is done mainly manually and by the animals. The agricultural returns are very low since it is a self-sufficient farming. So that is why it is found in some underdeveloped parts of Asia and Africa and also in the hilly northern eastern parts of India. We have the commercial farming. So the word commercial means anything to do on a commercial basis. And it happens to have a very extensive farmland with favorable soil, climate and environment. The main objective of this commercial farming is that it produces more crops for sale in the international market. Whereas in the intensive farming, the farmers, they just use it for themselves only. The main characteristics of the commercial farming is that the crops are produced to sell them in the market, particularly in the world market. The modern mechanized methods are adopted to raise the highest yield. And the large farmlands are extended over hundreds of hectares. So where is it being practiced? This type of farming is usually being practiced in the mid-latitudinal regions of North America, South America, Australia, and in the Central Asia and parts of Europe. Now we move on to the plantation crop. The plantation crop farming is a type of farming where the planted trees or bushes yield crops over a period of years. The yield or the crops produced in this farming are mostly used as raw materials for industries. It involves monocropping. So what does monocropping mean? The monocropping means where the practice of growing and harvesting a single crop in a year, such as tea, coffee, and rubber are the most important crops of plantation farming. It is mostly practiced in the tropical and the subtropical zones, such as the rubber plantation in Malaysia, tea plantation in Northeast India, in India and Sri Lanka, coffee plantation in Brazil, sugarcane and banana production in Cuba and West Indies. So moving on to the next heading, we go on to the farming methods that are practiced according to the climate. So here I have it's written as the wet farming. The wet farming is sometimes known as the humid farming also. Why is it so? It is because that the regions happen to have abundant rainfall, hence the name wet. Lands are prepared for cultivation with the advent of rainy season, and crops are planted. The harvest is done in late autumn or early winter. Rice, jute and sugarcane are grown in this way of our country. The humid farming is characterized by the following features. That would be, the cultivation is done specially with the help of rainwater. Different types of crops are grown according to the rainfall distribution. The amount of harvest depends on rainfall. Long rainy season often provides advantages for more than one cropping. So mostly the thirsty crops such as the jute, tea, sugarcane, rice are usually grown. In regions of humid farming, there are some disadvantages too. If there are excessive rainfall, then this excessive rainfall brings in enormous amount of flood, and naturally it happens to destroy the crops. The rainwater often washes out the fertile grains of soil, and soil erosion poses a serious problem. The humid farming is limited within the rainy season. So where are the humid farming practiced? The humid farming is usually practiced in some parts of India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Japan, South Korea, Indochina, Indonesia, Malaysia and Zaire. Now moving on to the irrigation farming. Irrigation, what does it mean? It is where the crops are produced with the help of irrigation. So irrigation water facilitates double or multiple cropping. The farmers enjoy good economic conditions for getting facilities of multiple cropping. So they are used especially where the high yielding seeds and the chemical fertilizers and the advanced method of cultivation are usually used in such kind of irrigation farming. As a result, irrigation, dry land turns the land into green with crops and vegetation. The farming faces some problems too. such as the cost of production of crops gets higher and the fertility of the land decreases due to long periods of irrigation and cultivation. So where is it even practiced? This type of farming is usually being practiced in areas of Egypt, Sudan, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China and Australia. Next, we have the dry farming. The dry farming method is practiced in regions of scanty rainfall. What does scanty means? Very less rainfall. So, where irrigation is not possible or where very limited amount of natural environment happens to favor these areas. So, the arable land is divided into several step-like features such as the terraces. So, when the rainwater falls into these terraces, it happens to roll down to the soil, and that is why it happens to make the soil wet and moist. Soil is prepared for cultivation before the rain comes so that the land can absorb water easily. Generally, the crops which needs less rainfall and can grow in dry areas are cultivated. The dry farming, where has it been practiced? It's been practiced in areas in the western parts of the United States and Canada, in Mexico and the Central America, in the drier uplands of Brazil, Australia, Israel, Syria, Turkey and parts of South India and Africa. We have the mixed farming also. The mixed farming again is a type of farming where the cultivation of the arable crops and the rearing of the livestock are done on the same farm, and that is why the term mixed farming. So in this farming, production of crops and rearing of animals are done side by side, and it is done especially on the same land. In this method, the farming techniques are highly advanced. Agricultural machineries, selected high-yielding seeds and maximum use of chemical fertilizers are common. The scientific crop rotation is also practiced in such kind of farming. The mixed farming was first introduced in Britain and the densely populated parts of Europe. It has gradually become popular in the eastern parts of the United States and different parts of Russia, Ukraine and Argentina, in several parts of China, Japan, France and India. Silkworms are also reared and crops are grown on the same farmland as something as the mixed farming method. So we go on to the classification of farming according to the intensity of cropping. We have the monoculture or the single cropping agriculture. So, the cultivation of only one crop, that is why the term mono, is called as a single cropping agriculture. In this farming method, only a single crop is grown and harvested in a year. So the crop which is best suited to the local soil and the climatic environment is grown. A particular single crop is raised year by year. Crop is grown on a commercial scale and it is grown mainly for export and foreign market. So by now you must have guessed what the monoculture or what the one crop farming means. The main and the famous example that we can give is the example of the tea plantation of Darjeeling in West Bengal and Assam Valley. The coffee cultivation in the coffee fazendas, those are the large fields in Brazil. The cocoa cultivation on Guinea, coast of Africa, and the rubber cultivation in Malaysia and Indonesia are one of the most distinctive examples of the monoculture. Next, we have the double cropping. From the word itself, you can make out what the double cropping means. When crops are cultivated and raised twice a year, the method is called the double cropping. The crops are usually raised twice a year, and they are raised according to the 2 distinctive seasons of a year. This type of farming is usually being practiced in areas of China, Japan, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Indonesia. Next, we have the multiple cropping. The word itself, multiple, means several. So, in the multiple cropping system, lands are cultivated for several times, say 3 or more times in a year, and farmers get the harvest several times. The lands are cultivated and the crops are raised several times in a year. Agriculture is done by means of advanced methods of cultivation with the aid of irrigation, high-yielding seeds, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. Intensive method of agriculture is followed, and crop rotation is widely practiced. So in the recent years, multiple cropping has been introduced in many parts of our country. It has become popular in Japan, China, USA, South Korea, North Korea, Indochina, and Myanmar. So, as we happen to sum up everything, we have another important part of agriculture. In the present day agriculture, we notice 2 more distinctive features in the method of farming. They are the crop rotation and the market gardening. So crop rotation and crop combination. Crop rotation and crop combination. The crop rotation is a type of farming in which the farmers cultivate one crop after another in regular succession to avoid the soil exhaustion. So the cultivation of a particular crop at a stretch on the same piece of land will tend to exhaust one particular kind of mineral nutrient of the soil. Exhaust means the crops starts getting tired. For example, the cereals like the wheat and the rice needs nitrates. So the cultivation of the crops eats away or reduces the nitrate, that would be the potassium nitrate and the sodium nitrate content of the soil, and that is why the soil becomes very poor or it becomes very impoverished. So on the other hand, the legumes such as the peas, the beans, the pulses and many other plants add nitrates to the soil by converting these free nitrogen of the air into nitrogenous nodules on their roots. Therefore, if they are included in the crop rotation, the need of the nitrogenous fertilizers will be minimized. By rotating different types of crops in successive seasons, soil fertility can be naturally maintained. So nowadays, the crop rotation is widely practiced. So finally, last but not the least, we have the market gardening and the orchard farming. What does market gardening mean? It is the garden in which vegetables are grown for sale in the market. In fact, it is a type of farming where the vegetables, fruits, flowers are raised to market them in the nearby urban areas or towns and cities. Such type of farming is also called the kitchen gardening. This type of farming is well developed in the areas near the urban settlements or the urban agglomerations, that would be your cities, your towns and your mega cities. It is a type of farming which develops in the pattern of vegetables, gardens and fruit orchards. So it develops with a view to supply fresh fruit, green vegetables, flowers and green crops for day-to-day consumption in the town. Villages of the rural areas near the great township practices this type of farming on small tract or small area of land in the shape of gardening. So they employed sufficient amount of capital and labor to get fruits and vegetables. Agricultural machineries, tools and equipments are used for preparing the farmlands, and pesticides and high-yielding seeds are usually used in such highest amount of production. So in this type of farming, with the production of the green vegetables and the fruits, poultry is also raised and the cattle are reared. So thus, the method of this farming is a type of mixed farming, as they supply vegetables, eggs, meat, and they happen to give to the nearby towns and cities also. And the main principal crops that are grown in the market gardening would be the tomatoes, cauliflowers, brinjal, cabbage, the bananas, potatoes, onions, spices, fruits and flowers, and they happen to do it according to the weather and the climate. The areas where it's been practiced is usually in New York, Tokyo, Mexico, San Francisco, and others. In India also, market gardening has got a stable footing on it, and that is why it has been well developed around Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Lucknow and others. So dear students, I hope you have been able to grasp whatever I have taught in this video. Till then, stay home and stay safe, and God bless you.